Thank you for staying with us on the program. Let's begin these discussions this morning in earnest. We'll start with the first, which of course it's much closer to home, one that has to do with the Edo State House of Assembly and the lingering crisis as it stands right now associated with this current assembly as being constituted. We're talking about constituting. We also understand that the House of Reps is seriously wading into this crisis, and just yesterday the Senate also decided to collaborate with the lower chamber of the National Assembly with a view to finding out exactly what the causes of this crisis are, and then find a lasting solution, once and for all kind of solution to this problem. But then again, it will appear that this is a bit more protracted than we can see from this point. We'll make sense of this and our second discussion on the program this morning. But first, you will have to meet my guest. Starting from my immediate left is Professor Julius Iyasele. He's the chairman of Academic Staff Union of Universities, that is ASU, UniBen chapter. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me this morning. Good morning, viewers.
Next to him is Sam Ajofo, and I hope I got that right, by the way. Yes. He is the Executive Director of Action for Community Development. Thank you as well for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me too.
All right, great.
It's great to be here.
Let me begin with you. Your passion for many of these socio-political issues cannot be misplaced. But let's narrow that passion now with regards to our discussion about the Edo State House of Assembly. Yes, a lot has happened on that front. This one I was saying a while ago that just when you think the crisis is coming to an end, then there's a new dimension to it. The National Assembly is wading in. That is both the upper and lower chambers of the National Assembly. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, the Speaker of the House of Assembly is saying that the House as is being constituted, as is currently constituted, has no problem, that the House is running hitch-free, and they should allow that cause to run, as against saying we should have a fresh inauguration of the State House of Assembly. What are your thoughts?
Well, just to say that the current House of Assembly in Edo State is a homogeneous one. That's okay. What I mean by that is that all the members currently are from one political party. So as it were, if there are problems, it means that we're having an implosion. And whenever you have such situations, just to record here, that is always very devastating. But this time, you find that it's the people actually that are likely to suffer this, because as it were, two elephants, but whether positive or negative, we may not state here, at war. But is that an inauguration had been conducted in Edo State, the way we know it, and all that. Legally, how many times will you inaugurate a State House of Assembly in one session? And so that has been done. I think the easiest way out of here is those members who are still playing the ostrich should find their way back to the House, find a way to reach out to the Speaker of the House and then play loyalty that they are ready to work, represent their people. That is the way I see it.
Let's look at the fact that there's a subsisting court order that the national chairman of the party, Comrade Adams Aliyu Shomole, that's of the APC now, and the National Working Committee of the same party, of course, by extension, the police, the DSS, and all the security outfits should stay away, should stay clear of the State House of Assembly. I mean, that's still in place. That court order is still in place.
Yes.
For a matter like that, won't it be conflicting for you to have the National Assembly wading in at this point?
Why would they come in? Who called them in? Is the Edo State House of Assembly saying that they are not able to handle their issue? Has the House of Assembly not been properly constituted? Then why should the National Assembly be influenced by whatever powers to now wade into Edo?
But they say there's a law that empowers them to wade into a matter like this, especially when it has assumed this kind of dimension.
But there's any problem here? What we're having here, is it worse than what we had in the past in this state? You know, the issue is that we have always said, you don't set bad example, don't set bad precedent, because one day, a man writes on the tiger, one day, you come down from that high horse, and then the tiger consumes the man. And that is what we are having here. We had situations in this state where the House of Assembly was removed, the roof of the House of Assembly was removed, and then the house carried from where it's supposed to be at an Enahorus building to the governor's office. Is it not? We were all here in this state, and now why is anybody crying blue murder? So it's simple. Okie is already there. The speaker is there. Members are meeting. If you want to be part of them, you join, and then represent your people.
Let me come to you now, Sam. Is this politics taking too far?
Well, in some sense, yes. Because the precedents we are building on, as if we are building on faulty foundations. Like the prof said just now, that similar thing happened years back.
Right.
And now it's being repeated. So you see that we've not really made progress. We are somehow either at the same standpoint or we are retrogressing. So if we indeed want to build on our democracy, we have to find a way to start righting the wrongs. Currently, it is indeed politics taking too far.
I've spoken with a few persons in the course of this week in particular, up until late last night, and a lot of them would seem to think that these legislators right now who are already inaugurated are distracted because they can't sleep with two eyes closed. They are not very sure how this whole thing is going to turn out. That rubs off on legislative business ultimately because they cannot pay full attention to what they were elected to do. Is there any truth in that?
Well, they will be the best people to judge on that. But the thing is that one thing we expect them to do is that since it's an all-party affair, since all the members of the House are from one party, they should know that all eyes is on them and the party to get it right. Because if this turns out wrongly at the end of the day, it will affect the future of the party in the state. So it's expected that the sooner they find a way to mend the fences and put a stop to these uncertainties and eventually insecurity as well, the better for both the party and the future of the party in the state.
You know, you cannot have this kind of conversation and not talk about a solution to the crisis as it stands right now. But some people who have been watching very keenly this event as it unfolds are saying that because there's correlation between all of these events, this crisis as it were, and the 2020 global race in Edo State, it's going to be hard to resolve until the elections, the election is conducted and then we get to move on beyond 2020 because there's so much of politicking happening already, obviously. In fact, there's some subtle campaign going on one way or another. How do we make sense of all of these and still be realistically optimistic that we can resolve this issue as quickly as possible?
Well, the thing is that when it comes to resolving crisis, these steps taken to transform the conflict from what it is now to eventually build and sustain peace can still be taken at any point in time. And the earlier they are taken, the better. The truth remains that the pressures for 2020 elections would have started. But till we get to 2020, the build-up is still not reached a high momentum yet. So if the leadership of the state, both at the executive and the legislative, begin to find a way to create peace, that's the only way forward. Because except there be reconciliation and peace, there is no way this will not impact negatively on the elections. Because if at the end of the day, this crisis is not resolved, then the chances of violence during the elections will be very high. And Edo people will not want such a thing to happen.
Let me come to you now, Prof. A few years ago, we heard of allegations in these states of how that some legislators back then were saying that they were being induced to the tune of 50 million to move from one party to the other. That was then. But now, with regards to this crisis at the House of Assembly, some legislators are even now saying that they are being bribed with things like jeeps and 5 million naira and so on and so forth. Are we reinventing the wheel in a bad sense?
But however, we have stated here before that our politicking in this country is inundated with money. It's money politics.
Is that not a global factor one way or another? Really?
Is it how global it is? That money, people account for whatever resource that is in their custody elsewhere. Here, there's no accountability. So if you have your own money, you can use it the way you like, not the state money that you are supposed to be accountable to. So, but that, as it may be, what is really happening here right now is that two forces are at play. In a circular motion, you have a centrifugal and a centrifugal force. If if it becomes too powerful or the other way, you fall on the other side. For right now, of course, if you want to belong, you become centrifugal in action and all that. So what I see here is that it's the people's will that is being subverted. That is the pain that some of us have. First of all, these legislators were voted in to represent a people. They had responsibility. You know how much it has cost this nation to conduct the elections, to put them in place. Now, that is being frittered away by just personal interest and greed. And then to crystallize it is that the will of the people, because on this station at a time, on air here, somebody had said, you know, that in politics, that you must oil the will. You must oil the people who are involved, the politicians that are involved. And then what we are hearing that is the cause of this problem is that some persons are not very happy with the government in place, the current leadership of the state, that money is not coming to the members of the party and all that. And we're asking, which money? Is that not the same thing that all of us have been fighting for? That of course, that you don't use the people's money for personal gains and all that. If you are elected to go make laws, you go there and make laws, and not that government funds should find this way into private hands and pockets. So if that is the reason, the people are watching. I know definitely that the people will rise at a time. There will be issues concerning this in this state. And of course, always the right thing, justice is what must be done. Always. That's the will. You can't subvert the will of the people, because the people will definitely rise against all this.
Now, talking about the people, for example, we understand that those legislators who have not come forth for inauguration already in some sense, making their constituents vulnerable because they are not being represented at the House of Assembly. Yes, that's an issue, very serious issue.
Yeah.
But does this give the opposition some kind of leverage, I mean, this crisis? Because we understand it's an all-APC House. So does it in any way give the opposition an advantage politically?
My co-discussant here has said it all, that if they are not careful, of course, they will lose this state to another political party. And then I see that the wide wind has started. I'm seeing relationship across political parties already being established. And so if they don't hurry up, make it while the sun shines, the next thing you are going to see is that it becomes so easy to jump across boundaries in this state. That is it. Another political party will spring up in this state and take over the leadership of this state. That is the honest truth.
Let me
can't help it.
Let me talk to Sam about something else. Internal politics, right? Because as I just said a while ago, this is all it's an APC affair all the way. And then you still have this crisis. Does that in any way throw to the fore the weaknesses, the flaws in internal politics in this country?
Well, it does. But the truth is that you can never take away or eliminate opposition.
Okay.
That's why I marvel at politicians when they want to go to the extent of getting all their members into the seat. For instance, if we had representatives from different political parties, I'm sure even this crisis would not have emerged.
In the first instance?
In the first instance, yes. Because in life, there will always be people with alternative views. For there to be progress, you have to have thesis, antithesis before you now get synthesis. You cannot have a system where everything is just going in one direction. So as long as politicians fail to realize this, if they destroy opposition externally, it will emerge internally. So that's what we see clearly happening in Edo State APC. By getting 100% thing there, you will still find people who will be loyal to a particular person
within the same
party,
right,
and not loyal to whoever is on the other side. So the best way to still go about it is to ensure that things are done the right way. Because eventually, if you allow true democracy to prevail, then it will actually be the wishes and the aspirations of the people, the will of the people that will prevail. Because eventually, when you don't, you will now, if you now appear to be oppressed or at danger of being oppressed, you will now cry back again to the people to fight for you.
All right.
So eventually, this style of politics, whereby politicians of the ruling party want to have it all, both at the legislative House of Assembly and local government, and eventually create a one-party state within the state, does not, we can all clearly see that it does not even still bring about peace and unity and development eventually.
A lot of persons are now saying, okay, you want to add something?
Yes, I want to add to that. What that question takes a swipe on the ideological stance of the political parties.
Okay.
What we simply have here is that the party members are not pursuing the ideology of that party, or that the party itself does not have ideologies at all. That is, that they don't have manifestos, nothing, no principle. It is just that where my bread is better butter, that is where we decide I tend to. What that simply means is that, okay, now is the party members are pursuing, some of them are pursuing personal gains and not, the gains of the party, as it were. That is what I'm saying here. It's not just that because I'm in APC, I must follow the principles of APC, I must do as it is, but what is happening here is personal gain. They are looking at maybe godfathers and then taking decisions. That is what it is.
You know, when you sound like this, I'm going to come back to you, Sam, in a bit, yes. But when you sound like this, it's a bit amazing. Amazing in the sense that over time, a lot of persons have thought, because different people from different backgrounds with robust experiences, I mean, capacity to bring value, have come to join politics across political divide.
Yes.
The narrative would have changed for the better. For instance, over the last couple of years, we've seen, I mean, between 1999 and today, we've seen respected, brilliant academics like yourself come into politics. We've seen Nigerians who have led international organizations of repute on different levels come to join politics. So one would have thought that would strengthen democracy, leadership within political parties, and this issue of ideology that you raised a while ago. So why haven't we seen that change? Is this still about the bread and butter?
It's still the stomach infrastructure.
But these guys have always had bread and butter.
No, you know, the primordial issues and so many other things, economic reasons and all, the level of poverty in the country. There is no one man you say here has it already. Because if you look back, go down to family lane, you see the number of persons that are depending on such individual. And then if you take it even away from this area of the country, this side of the country, and you go somewhere else, yeah, this morning, for instance, you see a sea of heads waiting on one man's door to just get a meal. And that is the situation we have. Because the level of poverty is so high, so everybody is looking for that same bread and butter. Not, in fact, people are, it's so easy to throw in their respect now for just money. That is what we have.
Okay, we're going to talk about poverty on the show big time this morning, but let me come back to Sam quickly now. A lot of people say, hypothetically, we have three arms of government. Of course, the executive, legislature, and the judiciary. But in practice, it appears it's quite a foul cry, because the legislature appears to be troubled on all sides, as the good book says, because whether it's on federal or state level, you see legislature always at the end, I mean, receiving end. The executive appears to be putting so much of pressure on the legislature for whatever reason, and it will appear in most instances legislature breaks under that pressure. Isn't that the case?
Well, you know, constitutionally, the legislative arm has one of our responsibilities to be that of oversight.
Okay.
And oversight gives it that power to be able to checkmate and possibly even sanction the executive when the executive errs. So that is the first line of panic on the side of the executive.
Okay.
That if they don't get a legislative arm that is in their favor, then they may end up getting impeached or being thrown out of office. So it is in that pressure, and unfortunately, our constitution gives too much powers to the executive that now makes the executive now put their pressure back on the legislative arm and intimidate them and bring them to a point of total submission in order for them to be able to govern according to their wishes. Although it's important and imperative to ensure that legislative arms cooperate, especially when it comes to developmental initiatives of government. But where you have a system whereby there is that tension, because many times when you look at issues of budgeting and the processes that they go through, the legislative arm, if they are left to really function the way they should, they will question quite a lot of things that comes through the executive arm. And in order for those kind of things not to happen, you now have two kinds of relationships. Either they try to buy them over or they try to intimidate them. You know, so unfortunately, whenever any of the two, first maybe they try to use buying over, when that doesn't work, then they are left with that of intimidation. So if we are to get this right in the future, we have to still insist on a system that balances the powers, reduce the excessive power of the executive arm, and pull more power to the judiciary and also the legislative.
I'm going to just talk to you a bit about this issue at the Edo State House of Assembly, Sam, but yes, we're going to take a quick break, so we're back shortly to be able to power this conversation further. Stay with us.
TMI, every opinion counts.
Thank you for staying with us. You were just going to add something to what Sam was saying.
Yeah, in addition to Sam's contribution to that question, is that we must remember one thing, that where the carcass is, that's where you find the ego. Who controls the fatter budget? Is it the governor or the legislatures? So here, because the government, the governor does all the approvals and all that, of course, you find that the legislators are cap in hand most times around the government house. That is one point. Two is that where does the influence lies? Who is more powerful in the process of governorship in the state? Is it the governor or the legislature? At the end of the day, of course, if you look at it, when you match status, power, influence, you find that the governors are always more powerful, more influential, and then, of course, that is why you find always that the three arms of government. Of course, you know, to a great extent, you don't even hear the third one. So it's the legislature, and then
the executive.
The executive you hear mostly, and of course, who have the reasons are very, very clear. And that is what I have to add.
We'll take time to talk about those reasons as long as time permits us. But we have a third guest on the program this morning. Fred Igwe is an economic analyst and a politician. Thank you, Fred, for joining us.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you viewers.
I'm just going to somehow drag you into this conversation quickly, right? We're talking about the Edo State House of Assembly and all of the crisis around the House as it stands right now. You really can't have this discussion most times. I mean, especially when you're looking at newspaper reports, looking at footages of the things happening as far as those State House of Assembly is concerned right now, without finding some very key elements in the president of the state governor, Mr. Godwin Obaseki, and the national chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Comrade Adams Aliyu Shomole. People say you can't have this discussion without finding at some point a way to pin it on them, both of them. Some people have said it's another reflection of the fact that our system is largely wired around individuals, powerful individuals, as against being based on a functional system. Isn't that the case?
I think that has become obvious to everybody in the state, that those are the two subjects of the crisis. The governor and the national chairman of the All Progressive Party, which is a sad narrative and report, because they are both members of the same political party, which makes it shameful that there should be a crisis so openly exposing their weaknesses before the opposition party that is looking to replace them and to use the very same weapons that they are using against themselves now in future elections. So they ought to be cooperating one with another to move the state forward. But we must be objective in our analysis. We cannot but blame the national chairman for what we see as this crisis, for the simple reason that from what has become notorious to everybody, the state governor has not been given a free hand to administer his office, the functions of his office. If Oshiomhole was stifled the way he tries to stifle the state governor, then I don't think he would have been able to function very well. He's the one who came, not because we didn't know about godfatherism in the state, but he made it his slogan that it was impeding the progress and development of the state, and that there will no more be godfatherism. But he has now come to take over not just as a godfather, but as a godfather with limitless powers, not really legitimate powers, powers that encompass what we perceived of Aneni and what we perceive today of Tinubu combined. Oh, Tinubu removed or was at the center, and front of removing the former governor of Lagos State. So I can do it in the state, in my own state, just because the governor is not towing my line. That is shameful. The people have voted. The people voted for this new assembly. Okay? And we expect that the new assembly should be fully inaugurated. But when you come to look at it, what is the state governor or what is the executive arm? Let me not personalize it to the state governor now. What is the executive arm standing on in not inaugurating the remaining members of the elected House of Assembly members? That they have not fulfilled their Code of Conduct, Code of Conduct Bureau requirements, which, to declare their assets. You had 2 months after the election, took 2 months to the time of inauguration, and you could not in that time prepare your assets declaration papers and submit them for vetting and confirmation. It's lackadaisical of them. So we should not so much blame them. If there was no such lacuna, then perhaps the executive would not have a leg to stand on in not inaugurating them. So you can actually apportion blames to.
Before I let you off on this, let me push one more question to you, which of course I asked this gentleman just before you showed up on the program this morning. There's a court order in place restricting or restraining, as it were, the National Chairman of the All Progressives Congress, the NWC of the All Progressives Congress, all the security agencies across the country from intervening in or wading into proceedings at the Edo State House of Assembly. Do you think that measure is far-reaching enough?
It is if they will obey it.
If they will obey it. So that's conditional clause,
yes,
isn't it?
It is if they will obey it. And they actually ought to obey it. Because the only way you can move a process forward is by negotiation and compromise. There have been there are problems that ought not to have been in the first place. Because coming here, I was thinking, okay, the governor saw the national chairman, who we can say installed him, okay, without mincing words, who we can say installed him as his partner in progress in the venture of ruling the state for the next 4, maybe 8 years. Then halfway down the line, your partner who was not stifled in his time now wants to stifle you, now wants to play the Godfather's role over you. And when that threatens your security, when that threatens your performance, what do you expect as a governor? Of course you will react. So we expect that between both of them, they can amicably resolve this issue. But where they have failed to, like we have seen now, they have failed to resolve it, then third parties, the traditional rulers, and I know the Omunoba has tried, and we know that a whole lot of people are wading in to try to bring both of them to a compromise. But it's not happening because they are both, in my opinion, in my candid opinion, they are both very, very stubborn. But more so, I would say, of the APC national chairman, because he's not giving the governor a free hand to administer the functions of his office.
Let me come to you now, Prof, before I go to Sam. The situation we're dealing with here, amongst other things, is also another very apt reflection of the fact that the system, of course, we already said, is wired around individuals as against being an independent system that has no respect for persons. Yeah. When you look at it today, it will appear the factor of godfatherism is actually still there, big time, isn't it?
But that is what it is now. We saw it just yesterday in Lagos State. In fact, what is being pounded around in this state is Ambode's principle or whatever it is.
That's what the crisis is all about.
So you remember in Gige, over the casket in Anambra State, and so we are also here now in Edo State. Of course, people will leave office and want to put puppets. They want to use human beings as puppets. But it's just to let human beings, all of us know that, you know, human beings are no machines that you say when you ask it to run clockwise, it must run clockwise. No matter how. We all have our own will and all that. That is the truth. So what you do is, at any time, we must learn that it is the best that we must put in place in power and allow the system to run. That is how we will all benefit maximally. I'm not thinking that some, I heard it, that some persons, when they leave office, they want to bring somebody who will not do well so that they will ever remain there as the best, as the hero of that office. The others want to put a tool that they will always use at their wish and cap. That is what is playing out in Edo State. But just to say, godfatherism that is what the national chairman of APC is trying to do in the state. We have heard that some person said that at the appointment of commissioners and all that, he almost brought suggested all the names of the commissioners in the state. Some said even the local government chairperson. With respect to these legislators now, we also heard that he single-handedly chose all those that were good. And so that is why so many are now who are loyal to him tacitly and then blindly also are still following him. So what we have, and they have taken to themselves now, APC too. You understand? And so the truth about it is not anything about code of conduct or that. Is those who are loyal to the governor, when you become loyal, you come and then you'll be inaugurated. That is just it. But if you are not, you are outside. That's why I mentioned the centrifugal and centrifugal force.
Right. Just before we take a break and begin our next conversation, let me ask Sam now, lastly. Now, there's a divide, obviously. There are those legislators we are told loyal to the state governor. There are those loyal to the national chairman of the All Progressives Congress, the APC. But going forward, how do we begin to strengthen our democratic experience in such a way that people can trust the system? Because there's this palpable lack of confidence in the system.
Yes, I was saying earlier that if we are to improve on the system, we have to strengthen the other tiers of government, the other arms of government, the legislative and the judiciary.
Right.
Currently, the powers that we have vested on the executive is far, far greater than these two. And since you now have legislative arm that is supposed to play an oversight function, and they lack the powers to do so, there is no way they'll be able to carry out that function properly. If we just take a simple step of, say, maybe moving the security apparatus to the judiciary instead of vesting it on the executive, and also give both the legislative and the judiciary direct frontline access to their budget funding, and not funding all the funds coming through the executive arm.
That's some autonomy, you mean?
Yes. If we bring in some of these kind of reforms and reduce the excessive power of the executive, then we will be able to have a system where oversight can truly function. But where the entire executive, the entire legislative arm, all their budgets, all their security apparatus, everything put together cannot compare to 1/3 or 1/5 of all that is with the executive, they will never be able to function in that oversight role.
Okay,
successfully.
I think we're just going to end this conversation here.
But why not add that we must return also power back to the people? If you want to strengthen these institutions, the power must return back to the people. What I mean by that is that we must allow votes to count. What is happening here, why this will of Edo people are being subverted here, is because many of these persons came to power without recourse to the number of votes that were scored.
So what we're saying is repercussion.
Yes, now that is what is happening.
Let me quickly add
Yes.
this. Okay. You see, when the United States president is elected and then inaugurated, the inauguration is a ceremonial activity. By 12 noon on the 20th of January of the year he's supposed to resume office, whether there's an inauguration or not, he automatically is the president and begins to function as such. If we were to adopt such a system, whether or not you go through inauguration, on such and such a day and such a time, you become fully functional as an elected member. That is, you see, we have to bring these checks and balances into place to be able to stop the abuses of the actors. There will always be abuses, but all this stems from the faulty constitution that we have that was handed to us by the military, that was never, collectively debated with all checks and balances or necessary checks and balances put in place to curb the excesses of the actors.
Okay, let's take a quick break at this point. We are told that 64,000 Nigerians thereabouts are murdered each year, of course, in this country, and there are underlying causes responsible for this very alarming and extremely disturbing statistics. We'll talk about the underlying causes when we return from this quick break. Do stay with us.
TMI, every opinion counts.
I'm sure, gentlemen, Nigerians understand that as a country and as a people, we've been dealing with insecurity issues for quite a while now. But this piece of information, statistic, as released by the UN, now further complicates our understanding and reality of insecurity in this country. 64,000 Nigerians are said to be murdered every year, according to the United Nations. And we are told that some of the reasons are unemployment, lack of inclusion, poor governance structure, dearth of infrastructure, poverty, extreme poverty, that is, and so on and so forth. Sam, I'm going to begin with you. One time, Nigeria had been described as the poverty capital of the world. When you heard that, for example, what was your response first to it?
Well, the problem about poverty did not start today.
Okay.
It continues to be exacerbated by failure of governance. Unfortunately, we've not had improvement in governance since 1999. It appears as if the next government takes a nosedive, the next one takes a further nosedive till we got to where we are currently. And unfortunately, too, when you look at poverty in Nigeria, there are two main divides. If you listened or watched the lecture that the governor of Kaduna State gave recently, that the north is actually where most of these indices come from. Unfortunately, the system in place there has not really encouraged people to rise out of poverty, because by the time you have a system that does not encourage mass education of the people, as long as people are undereducated or not even educated at all, their chances of falling deep into poverty is higher. You know, so except government begin to really take deliberate steps to see that more persons are educated, pass through, at least get up to a degree where they can be able to get, be able to fend for themselves, then before we can start coming out of this poverty crisis. Again, you also have the pressure of poor governance, the excessive looting, the failure of government to commit to creation of employment, and the ever increasing inequality between the have and the have not every day in the country, in a country where millions of our youths, you know, a youth nation, majority of our youths are unemployed. You still find the cost of governance, the huge pay of elective persons so far above what the ordinary man can comprehend. In this high level of inequality and injustice and exploitation and extortion, you now create a system where people are frustrated, people cannot survive. And in the course of all that complexities, poverty now leads to crime, crime leads to death, and suicide, bombing, and all these things keep increasing, because as long as the system frustrates people and makes them lose a sense of belonging in the nation, no sense of, say, oh, hope or to survive, then people have no option than to take to crime or extreme actions. And in this kind of hopeless state, you now have two divides. You have those in the north who maybe through their Majiri system will trust a wealthy man and Alhaji or whatever, and if they can just get a meal from him in a day, it's okay. But in that kind of mix, you have a system that now keeps people poor and makes them lose any form of ambition or aspiration. So you have a system that grows and cultivates poverty, all for people to just have something to eat. Then you now have people on the south who, in the face of this frustration, will either take up to advanced fee fraud, 419, or crime, or other means, ritual killings and all that. So government really needs to take this seriously and ensure that education is not just functional, but beyond getting people educated, they actually ensure that jobs are created.
Okay, so, Fred, I'll come to you quickly now. Sam has made continuous reference to education and how important it is in this conversation. But then again, there's a correlation fundamentally between education and employment or job creation. Why are we not addressing that, as it were, gap that we have in between?
Before I come to that, let me just mention briefly what I believe the root cause of all this violence is. Our leaders. We have people in office who do not have appreciation for human lives. People who do not have compassion for their fellow citizens. People who do not have empathy for the next person. When you have such people in office, what do you expect? They will never make good laws. So, if you are talking about education and the correlation with the violence and the lack of employment and all of that, you have people who are there consumed by their greed, consumed by their self-centeredness. They are not thinking about the people. You need people, by God's grace and for God's sake, to build a nation. If they all die, then how are you going to build a nation? Are you going to live? Are you going to drive yourself? Are you going to do everything for yourself and by yourself? When the United States went to war in 1952, I think, 54, the Korean War, they lost 54,000 soldiers, and they wept, they cried. Vietnam War, 52,000 soldiers. War. In Nigeria, we are not at war. We are losing 52,000 a year to violence.
64.
64,000 to violence. Is that not a shame? You know, China managed a large economy of 1.1 billion at the time, 1.2 billion, but now about 1.6, 1.7 billion. And when the time came for them to wake up as a giant, it was those same people that seemed to be nothing all those years that put their hands to the plow and built their nation. And today it's an envy of the world. We need every hand. We need every man to be strong and able in our society. We should feel blessed when we hear the cry of a newborn baby, because it's our opportunity to groom intelligence, to groom capacity, to groom manpower. That is what we lack in our leaders. We have crimes going on. Things led to where we are now. There are many things we could have corrected long time ago that we can even begin to still correct. For a long time, I'll tell you, the way you combat such crimes, because they are criminal in nature, you know, the cause of it, is that you have to be able to know who your people are. Like we are complaining today of the federal government attempt at establishing rural colonies, okay? And Nigerians are coming to tell you that these people coming in are not Nigerians. They can't speak any Nigerian language. They can't even speak English. So where have they been? How have they communicated? And with whom have they been communicating? So they are not Nigerians. Early in Babangida's administration, a song that we have sung for several years, let us get ID card for all Nigerians so that we know ourselves. You must do this. They toyed with it. Why? Because you do not want the myth of the northern population being higher than the southern population to be exposed. If you do not think it's a myth, by God's grace, or by God's sake, or for God's sake, provide ID, identify everybody. If you can track everybody.
But we have an ID card, I mean, an ongoing national identity management
we do
initiative.
have one. Reluctantly, we have one. But how long does it take to have an ID? Okay? For several years, they have not been able to capture even, I would say, 10-20% of the Nigerian population. It doesn't take that much. It doesn't take that long to do it. If every state were allowed, or if every state were proactive to identify their people, as it is in other climes, okay, they will be able to know those within their states and track them, track their movement. If they begin to engage in crime, that's the way you track them. If you want to plan for a budget, that's the way you plan, because you know the demographics. You know the people who are there. You know how to plan for them. So, yes, we need to educate our people. It's number one. It's very important. Like I tell those I have the opportunity to interact with, I say, the panhandler you see on the street, that beggar, that little boy, it pains me, it bleeds my heart when I see them. Because they are uneducated, we see them in that state, never thinking, never realizing that those same children are going to grow up to be adults very soon. And then they will be engaged. Or they will self-employ in one vocation or another, perhaps selling food. Because they were never educated. They don't know anything about hygiene. They don't know anything about sanitation. They will cook rubbish for you. And you believing that you are getting something hygienic, you will innocently buy it, and it will hurt you. But it all goes back to the lack of education that you refuse to give to these kids. So we need to know who our children are. It's not who my children are. who our children are as a people, as a society, and begin to educate them, give them quality education. And there is a correlation between prosperity of a nation and the average level of education of the people of the nation.
Let me come to Julius now. Poverty it's a worrisome phenomenon in this country right now. Of course, even the UN says that's one of the reasons we have these higher rates of murders in Nigeria. How do we begin to address poverty? Because it's very deep. We have seen the federal government come up with things like SIPs, social investment programs, and so on and so forth. Those initiatives appear not to be doing enough to address this big problem.
Yes, before I address your question, it's just to also crystallize here that I don't agree totally that poverty is the reason for the 64,000.
One of the reasons, it was mentioned as one of the reasons.
It's a remote reason.
Okay, not immediate.
Not immediate. That is the truth. Because the Bible said the poor you will always have in your midst.
That's guaranteed.
Yes. We had poor persons since growing up. In the 60s, I have always seen poor people around.
Are we not supposed to be bothered with the rates, the increasing rates?
Yes, but what is actually the reason for all of this? There are reasons. Number one, denial. If you deny somebody his rights, that is where injustice comes in. Of course, the person will take to violence. Number two is some primordial issues, reasons. For instance, there are a group of people who want to action with Madame Fodio's idea that came even as far back as the 1800 something in this country, that they must dip Quran in the Atlantic Ocean. That, the 64,000 you are seeing, came not too long. It started the age of the Boko Haram and all that. And what do these people stand for? What does these headsmen stand for? And then if you go further, you call it Fulani headsmen. What are their reasons? Because these are the reasons why people are being slaughtered now. So you find that it is not totally poverty. The poor is always there, but if we need to address the remote cause or the remote reason and then leave out the immediate, it's clear that government policies, have said here before, that government, they are not sincere with many of the policies that they bring to bear. Look at the money thing that a whole vice president of a country was doing, going to the market himself to give 10,000 naira to people. Was that genuine? Was it really true that he wanted people to have 10,000 naira and be able to come out of the poor brackets? But because he wanted, it was because of the elections, to sway, the conscience of the people in another direction. That was why he went into the market. That's why he was doing all that. So what I'm saying here is that our governors, our government, they are not sincere in what they are doing. Very many of them, that is the honest truth. Otherwise, they would have, okay, look at it now. It's the same government that's okay, they want to bring across to the people the ease of doing business. Very recently, if you hear the high tariff for you to be able to register your product to sell in Nigerian market, no small scale individual or business can afford it. Then you waited until after the elections, and then you were the one before the election talking about the ease of doing business. But just immediately after, you have now changed the rates. People have shouted in the past, no truck easily move on Nigerian roads. Trucks that haul goods and services in this country can move easily. It's either you are held by the police or the road safety or all different shades of security apparatus in this country. People have been shouted. Had government come out to now make one policy that, look, nobody collects money from a truck that is carrying goods on our roads Of course, this makes it difficult for businesses to thrive. It makes it difficult, or more, now makes it more expensive for goods that for consumers to buy. So, what are we saying here? This is the problem. If the government decides one day that yes, let's bail this country out of the quagmire that we have before us, then everybody will come to a discussion table, and then we will do it. I think there's something more. I've said it before. The structure, this current structure, is not working. There's no way it's going to work. That is the basic truth. And then it is only if it's only a blind man that will see something that is going to kill it, or kill him or her, and will continue to be immersed in it. We expect, when you talk about change, let change be change in reality. We need to change our system of governance. We need to change the ideological stance of this country, because the current style is not working at all.
Okay, let's begin to look at things that will likely work, but I want to talk to Sam about those things now. If you look at Nigeria today, you realize that from the reports we're getting, we have over 100 million people in this country who live below the poverty line. And we are told the benchmark essentially is those who live on around $1.90 a day. President Muhammadu Buhari had promised not too long ago that his government will lift at least 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. Is there feasibility in that, given the indices that we have in front of us?
Well, if you were to judge by the current indices and what is currently obtainable, that might sound more like part of political promises without very clear line of action to achieve it. Because if you want to indeed put an end to poverty in the country, the steps that they need to take, they are not taking it, and they are yet to take it. For instance, number one step is to ensure that there is stability, economic stability. If we could have a military head of state like Abacha, keep the naira to dollar at a stable exchange rate for some years, we should be able to achieve that. If you have that stability, then people can invest, people can start up business, and ensure that you bring down the exchange rate to an extent. Once we do that, then small-scale businesses can flourish again. Because unfortunately, under this government, from 2016 to 2018, a lot of small-scale businesses collapsed. So if they are not doing that yet, I wonder how they intend to fight poverty. Then secondly, the money that is now being paid for petroleum subsidy is perhaps more than 5 times what the previous government used to pay. With so much money going into recurrent expenditure and not enough funds to go into capital expenditure and actually ensure that projects are carried out that will touch the lives of the people directly, you can't see any of that happening. Also, thirdly, even simple things that can be done. This is a government that those at the helm of affairs have enjoyed, because of their position, quality health services abroad. So if you want to improve the lives of the people here, you want to end poverty, one good sign, one good thing you should have done, haven't benefited from such a thing, is to ensure that at least you improve the quality of healthcare in the country. After the life-saving opportunities he has had through the state funds that he enjoys as our president, we expect that he should have at least contributed towards the improvement of the health sector. There is no sign in that area at the moment. You know, then even currently at the education sector, what we learned recently was that the cutoff mark for entering tertiary institution was even reduced. So it's as if standard of education is falling down. So when you are bringing down standard of education and you are preaching that you want to take people out of poverty, you are saying something and doing the exact opposite. You know, so as far as their actions clearly negate what they say, we cannot take them seriously.
I would like to talk to Fred about this more, but he just mentioned education. Incidentally, you have spent decades of your life teaching. One time I asked you a question about people's opinions generally, saying that, for example, the level of education has sagged and continues to sag. What are your sentiments today, given where we are?
Well, to a great extent, I don't agree with that.
Okay.
What we must do is the restructuring of facets of life is what we must do. The type of education that we give, the style and all that is what we must improve. We must also improve infrastructure to catch up with the advancement in the world globally. You understand? Because we're still giving out the old type, the system. Now people are writing on the board, they click on Google, they are can illustrate what is happening in other parts of the world. Even around us here, example, education is going Montessori and all that. You should be able to show, give illustrations, show examples. So what is going on is that we need to improve. And that is why you notice that the union, for instance, I belong to, we've been fighting and asking for revitalization of the educational sector. But however, with respect to poverty and education, I will tell you right now, in the University of Benin, examinations are going on. I can tell you, I weep, you see the number of children that are roaming around, walking the corridor, even bothering, even poor lecturers, for funds to be able to clear and pay their school fees. In fact, I have about 2 on my hands already. A third came, even from my own village, asking, she has not cleared, she has not paid school fees, no acceptance yet, and the poor child had passed JAMB and wants to read. And of course, when you see situations like this, and these are even children of graduates of Nigerian University, just that their parents are either not employed or underemployed, and so can no more give education that their own farmer parents gave them in the past. So that is the situation that we have here. People are very highly incapacitated now in this country. There are no jobs anywhere, no encouragement of any type from government and all that. So that is what we have. It's not as if, because our graduates, when they still live here and go to other climes, they come out in flying colors. You have heard it. Many of our students who come out of this place, they go to UK, for instance, to do masters and all that. They are tops in their classes and all that. So how are we now going to agree that the standard of education, what is happening with lowering of JAMB scores and all that, is still enmeshed in the same thing we are talking about. I went to a university in Katsina as a NUC verification officer and discovered there that even, that was about 2 or 3 years ago, that entry JAMB score cutoff was already lower to about 170 and all that. And somebody who is in chemistry, for instance, didn't do chemistry in JAMB and all that. So the same elements we have in our government in trying to capture all these, their people and all of that, are the ones lowering this. Find out now, there's no way Uniben will go lower than 200, which is what we have always maintained.
Yes, I've seen the list of the scores and their required scores. Uniben is 200.
Yes, now, you find that even the government are the one now will be breathing down on Uniben's neck that, meanwhile, you already have over 40,000 candidates that have passed above 200. And somebody is lowering JAMB score to 120, 140 and all that. How are you going to take the, and meanwhile, out of that 40,000 candidates in a session, you are not going to take more than 8,000 to 9,000. Look at the number, with over about 200, and then maybe other universities. But because these same people, it's either they are the owners of the private universities where nobody is subscribing to, they lower the score so that these children can come to their private universities, or they are from areas where people don't go to school and all that. So we must overhaul the educational sector. In so many other areas and all that, I won't agree with you that the standard of education.
Okay, let's move away from education quickly. I was going to talk to you about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths.
Yes.
I hope time allows us to do that. But let me come to you, Fred. Oxfam is saying Nigeria will need about $24.9 trillion, $1 billion to lift people out of poverty in this country for just 1 year. So if we have to continue to lift people out of poverty for the long haul, we will need around that same amount every other year. Do we have the resources to sustain such a cycle?
We do. We are well within capacity to do that.
Okay.
Why do I say that? The number one and the most important production resource is the human capacity. We are 200 million people in this place. That is a little over, not a little over, that's almost about 60 or 70% of American population. And their economy, it's about 40, 50 times our economy. So that means if with 60% of their economy, of their population, there will be maybe about 40 times our economy. We have the capacity to accomplish that. It's human capacity. I call myself, I like to think of myself, let me put it that way, as an apostle of efficient production and productivity, as opposed to effective production and productivity. The difference being that efficiency is the allocation of resources to their highest economic value, as opposed to effective production or productivity, which is just being able to do it. If you can do it well, it's okay. So the leading corporations in the world, the leading organizations in the world, keep efficient production and productivity as their major focus, number one focus. If we are going to get there, we cannot continue to deceive ourselves. If you deceive yourself, you stay where you are. You don't live in self-denial. We are not moving forward. We all know, and that's why we keep coming here to talk. If I must refer to his reference to this Rugal colony and this primordial or parochial thinking of some sections of the nation wanting to colonize the others, I just want you to begin to think the amount of time every one of us have to distract ourselves to read more and more about this distraction. Just think about that cumulative time that we could be channeling towards positive productivity. It's so huge. But we don't need such distractions. We want to be able to focus on production. How do we focus on production? Every nation in the world struggles to attract foreign direct investors and investments. What are the conditions that must exist for us to be able to do that? China is happy to have Apple Computer company employing 1.5 million Chinese in China. And Chinese people don't speak English. Do you know that in Nigeria, for example, we could be enjoying the services of multinationals who want to establish call centers because we speak English. India, who are harder to understand when they speak than Nigerians, enjoys that opportunity because there is relative peace and security in the place. We have not created those conditions to make such companies want to come to Nigeria, where we even have an advantage. There are many aspects of production where as a nation and as a people we have advantages that we are not even taking advantages of. We must begin to look at this. Talk about education, talk about training. Proliferation of educational institutions. Proliferation of vocational training institutions. These are necessities. These are things we just have to have. We must be aggressive about it. It must be dynamic. Like if we have to have quality education, for example, to borrow from the prof now, talking about the cut-off marks and all of that for students. What do they do in the United States? There is a buffer system, the community college system, that trains the population who are not exactly ready and prepared for the higher institutions to get some training. They come out with associate degrees, which is something equivalent to our HND here. And that is a robust system. It's nationwide.
And it's working.
Of course, because those who want to live just being secondary school leavers, high school leavers, they go into that system and they get further education, further training, to be able to function at a higher capacity than people just leaving secondary schools. You do that while you are there. When you come to yourself, you come to your senses, you say, okay, now I want to further. Then you look to the higher institutions. It is foolhardy trying to get people who are not mentally prepared and lump them with those who have made the sacrifice, okay, to get in that position, to be able to score high. Even if you have a class of, it's like lumping a class of class 3 students and Form 6 students together. Of course, the ones in class, the ones in the lower class, they are going to distract the lecturer. They are going to impede the pace of education. What you want to do is not to impede the pace. You want to distinguish people quickly
and fast track progress and development.
So you want to be dynamic about what you are doing.
Right.
Separate the wheat from the chaff, and you know what to apply to them later. You know what to apply to this. These ones are going to design our systems. They are going to design our TVs. They are going to design our computers. They are going to design our planes. They are going to design our ships. These ones are going to be the technical crew. You train them accordingly.
Okay, incidentally, we don't have all the time, but I'm just going to give 30 seconds to you, Prof, to wrap it up on your thoughts on this discussion.
Yeah, just taking from there is to find out in this our economy now, who trains the middle manpower. Everybody now wants to come to the university. Even government is saying that, okay, they want to equate or equal the polytechnic degree with the university degree.
Is that counterintuitive?
Yeah, of course. That was created for a reason at a time. Not that you can't make a country. You just have everybody now coming into the university. You have to design the university, like he has said. Somebody is to action your design, and that is where you have the polytechnics in the past.
Okay, let me give you 30 seconds too, Sam, to wrap it up for us.
Okay, still on this issue of education, it's not very right to just bring out some few persons. Maybe some persons are excelling because few persons are doing well, or we have private schools to now say that standard of education has not fallen. The standard of education fell because the 6334 system of education collapsed. Government could not implement it successfully. It was since that time that education standard began to fall. And following that process was the terrible things that started happening in our tertiary institutions, like lecturers collecting money to pass students and even having sexual intercourse with students and all that. These are the things that led to the fall in standard of education. If you ask those in the private sector, they will tell you, if they are conducted interviews of graduates where you find graduates of universities unable to write application letters, graduates of universities unable to express themselves properly. You know, so there has to be a rebate of the system, so that especially areas that has to do with the qualitative education and also technical vocational educational training that we could not successfully implement when the 6334 system failed, is when we're able to get it right again from that program that we're able to ensure qualitative education for all. A system where few people are able to excel is not the best judge for the total.
Okay.
So that's
I think that's much we can take. We have to go on a quick.
But it's not right. I will sit here. We have to agree that lecturers are. You don't. Collecting.
It's only saying it's a fact of it, but we don't have the time. We have to take. We have to take a quick break, gentlemen. Okay, we are taking a quick break. We have to wrap it up here. Actually, it's just that we will need to continue to have this conversation from time to time, because the issues themselves are dynamic in nature. I've been talking with Sam Ajufo, is the Executive Director, Action for Community Development. Thank you for coming, Sam. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And just next to Sam is Fred Igwe, is an economist, economic analyst, I should say, and a politician. And next to me, just to my immediate left, is Professor Julius Yasele, is the chairman, ASU.